I live in New York City, and there are now 100,000 kids who go to the New York City school system, which is over a million kids. They are unhoused. They don't even have places to sit and watch, the school if they don't go into the class. And so they don't have access to internet. They do not have, anything, a place to do homework, a place to rest their head. And so that is a huge issue here. We talk about rural America. It's a huge issue here in the city. And I think that, we're seeing a big a political war between progressives and mainstream Democrats. Bill de Blasio ran as a progressive, and, he certainly was, I guess, more so than Michael Bloomberg, but that's not hard. But there's so many things that, the school system was not able to give to kids. I knew so many kids who, teachers, I have a lot of teachers who are friends, and they just, were trying to get Chromebooks for the kids. They were trying to do whatever they could to get internet access or find a place they could all pod together. And so it's really a situation that cuts across Democratic Party, urban, rural. It's a terrible situation for everybody. And going back to the internet situation, it should be a public utility. I agree. But this is what happens when you allow just a few corporations to build and then own the infrastructure. There's no profit motive, I guess, to build in West Virginia, rural West Virginia. Why would you do that? And unfortunately, because we don't make anything or build anything or have the government be involved in anything anymore, then that's what happens. It's like we constructed this terrible infrastructure, and then the roof got blown off and it was entirely exposed. There's problems all over.
I mean, that's a great point, because coming out of this, whether you're in a rural district, Amarillo, Texas, right outside, 5 minutes away from where I am right now is extremely rural, or you're in New York City, the inequity exists and it's going to be affecting different communities in different ways. But do you not see some sort of like populist, progressive populist, and maybe even conservative populist bond happening, because people have to respond to their voters? I mean, if parents are annoyed that they have to teach, they want their kids to go back to school in Texas because they don't have the ability to teach their kids. Maybe they don't care about COVID, but they care about the fact that they're being pulled from work and that they can't afford the devices. And then you match that with a family in Queens who has the same issues. I mean, isn't there an opportunity here for bipartisan action? I laugh a little bit, action being the laughing point.
I wanted to believe so. I wanted to say that, what Trump was doing, what Republican lawmakers for so many years of doing, the privatization and just cutting off funds for people, would catalyze that, right? Look at Florida. They just pulled out of the unemployment, the extra topper, because their amount of unemployment they give people was so low, and 13,000 Floridians have died. But what we see, the disinformation epidemic, people don't seem to believe, even when they are suffering, that they are suffering or that things are being done to hurt them. So I think that is our number one obstacle, because I do think that people generally are motivated by having help, by getting things for themselves, for their families, for their communities. But we now live in a world where if they can't acknowledge that there's a problem, we're not going to see any sort of movement catalyzed.
Yeah, I agree with Jordan. Perception is reality. So if you don't see it as a problem, then you're probably not going to speak out for solutions. But I'm hoping that we're reaching an apex point, a critical point where parents will start to band together, whether you're conservative, Democrat, progressive, whatever, and for the sake of their own children, because a lot of people across the board are suffering in the same way. So I'm hoping that sooner than later. I mean, I think we're behind, but we really need to take collective action.
Yeah, I would say Arizona was a place where there was one of the big teacher strikes in 2018, and that's a state that's looking to turn blue. And, Doug Ducey has done a pretty terrible job with COVID, so that doesn't help them. But education and the lack of funding has really turned the tide politically there, where people who were, suburban moderate Republicans are now saying, wait, we should have schools. We shouldn't be doing this 4 days a week. We should be able to have education for our kids. And so, in places where the disinformation maybe isn't as high, it makes a big difference.
Yeah, no, I agree. I will also say that these local issues are hitting hard this time around, right? Their kids, Republican moms that aren't able to get Chromebooks for their kids because their school didn't have funding to buy enough, and so they're running out. I think more than ever, people are really starting to see how their different parties are starting to address these issues. And so I'm hoping that, that is also going to be translated with people voting differently at the ballot box.
We saw in Oklahoma, and I agree with you, we saw in Oklahoma, Missouri, they passed Medicaid expansion. In some places, Oklahoma, it was a very tight race, but it happened. And you would not have expected that a bunch of years ago, where it was the evil part of Obamacare and they ran against it. And, it didn't pass in a ballot initiative a few years ago. And so even if it's not partisan, people are starting to vote for things that our progressive values. Whether it was Amendment 4 in Florida in 2018, Hillary Clinton lost that state, but it passed by 66%. Of course, Republicans then undid it, which, to their advantage. But we're seeing at least policy issues. People are moving to the left and are seeing, progressive values.
Thanks for watching and listening to The Nomiki Show. But remember to click like and subscribe on YouTube, and please share on social media. If you're not already a patron, please join us for as low as $5 a month on patreon.com/The Nomiki Show for early and special content. That investment makes a huge difference. We are not corporate media raking in the dough. It's really you guys that are keeping us going. So please consider being a patron. And to our current patrons, thank you so much. We are incredibly grateful to you. We also now have swag. So check us out on thenomikishow.com to get your mugs, your totes, and your stickers.